Ang saya-saya mo. Excited ka nang umuwi. Di alintana ang takot. Buo ang loob na harapin ang pandemya. Ngunit kahit anong tapang, pilit kang susubukin. Buti na lang may mga ahensya ng gobyerno na laging handang umalalay at tumulong.
Hi, Han. Ito okay naman.
Talaga? Ako, excited na makita kayo.
Malapit na mahal ko. I love you too.
Tibayan mo lang ang iyong loob.
Hello?
Hi, Han.
Han? Asan ka? Labas ka naman, oh.
Sa labas? Bakit?
Dahil siguradong may parating na kislap ng pag-asa. Para masilayan ang iyong pamilya.
Magandang umaga Pilipinas. Welcome po sa atin pong press briefing. Kasama po si Cabinet Secretary Karlo Nograles. Good morning po, Sec.
Magandang umaga. To our friends, members of the Malacañang Press Corps, the staff and officials of the PCOO who are here to extend assistance during this briefing sa ating mga kababayan. Magandang umaga po. Last night, President Rodrigo Duterte presided over a full cabinet meeting that tackled several issues and concerns, matters I have been tasked to share with the public. These issues involve the environment, law enforcement, food security, our COVID-19 vaccination program, and the country's credit rating. Please allow me to begin by underscoring the fact that since the beginning of his administration, the President has repeatedly stressed the importance of protecting our environment and strictly implementing environmental laws. His commitment to preserve the environment was evident when he ordered the closure and rehabilitation of Boracay. And it is evident as well in his directives to ensure that mining companies comply with the laws, rules, and regulations that govern their operations. Kaya naman po, isa sa mga tinalakay ng gabinete kagabi ay ang mining operations sa Tumbagan Island sa Languyan, Tawi-Tawi. The President is very much concerned about reports that the island has been completely devastated as a result of mining operations in the area. The island has at this point been mined out. And while rehabilitation efforts are underway, the President is issuing a directive to stop any and all mining in Tumbagan Island and to step up the rehabilitation of the area by planting more trees and other efforts of rehabilitation. More actions will be considered as more light is shed regarding the state of the island and the conduct of mining operations in the area. On another item on the agenda last night was a concern that Senator Bongo mentioned last week after stories surfaced that students were selling their lewd photos online. Various reports that reveal a surge in child pornography have caught the President's attention, which is why he asked the Department of Justice to brief the Cabinet on the matter, as well as recommend actions that can be taken to address the online sexual exploitation of minors in the country. Online sexual exploitation has always been a major concern of the government, particularly the DOJ Interagency Council Against Trafficking, or IACAT. It has been discovered, however, that the pandemic has contributed to or even been used and taken advantage of as we see the disturbing rise of online sexual exploitation cases in the country, the victims of which have a median age of only 11 years old. Nakakabahala po ang numero. Suspicious transaction reports related to online sexual exploitation during the pandemic more than doubled. From 19,000 in 2019, it has now ballooned to 47,937 in 2020. To address this, the government is adopting the recommendations of the Department of Justice, which are as follows. First, to direct the NTC to immediately impose sanctions on Internet Service Providers, or ISPs, for failure to fulfill their duties under Republic Act 9775. These duties, may we remind the ISPs, include, number 1, immediately notifying the PNP or NBI within 7 days upon knowledge thereof that its server or facility is being used for child pornography. Number 2, preserving evidence for purpose of investigation and prosecution. Number 3, furnishing particulars of users involved in child pornography. And number 4, most importantly for the ISPs, installing available technology to intercept or immediately block access to child porn. Second, to issue an executive order that will pave the way for, number 1, the strengthened cooperation between IACAT, the Interagency Council Against Child Pornography, and other relevant agencies. Number 2, the formulation of a case management protocol. And number 3, the streamlining of online sexual exploitation information dissemination efforts to be headed by the PCOO. Pangatlo, and we call on Congress for this, to certify as priority the passage of bills pending in Congress to amend Anti-Trafficking in Persons Act that, number 1, exempt trafficking in persons from the anti-wiretapping law. Number 2, to broaden the membership of the IACAT. And number 3, to impose obligations on ISPs and tourism establishments, all in the effort for us to destroy child pornography in the Philippines. Pang-apat, to strengthen the IACAT by providing plantilla positions and additional funding. Malinaw po na hindi hahayaan ng gobyerno na madagdagan pa ang biktima ng sexual exploitation sa gitna ng kinakaharap nating pandemya. Also on the agenda last night, because of as a consequence of the pandemic, was the topic on food security. May mga lumalabas na survey na tumaas talaga ang hunger incidence dahil sa pandemya. At malinaw po sa datos na ito ay bunga ng pagkawala ng trabaho at hanap buhay. The average hunger rate for 2020, or the entire year of 2020, was pegged at 21.1% of Filipino families na nakaranas ng kagutuman. A figure that sums up the adverse effects of the pandemic on the lives and livelihoods of our people. The Department of Agriculture, however, has done a yeoman's job in its food security efforts despite all the challenges we face during this pandemic, as it sought to make food available, affordable, accessible, safe, and healthy. Nagawin ang makakaya para walang pila. It should be stressed that even factoring in the pandemic and losses due to recent typhoons, the country established a record high rice production in full year 2020, producing 19.44 million metric tons of palay. This is 3.33% higher than the previous year. The growth of the agriculture sector also came hand in hand with the management of inflation as food supply and rice management efforts bore fruit and a new food security framework was adopted. To build on these gains, the government is adopting the Department of Agriculture's recommendations for a whole of government action in 2021 that will require the Department of Agriculture to team up with various government agencies, including the Zero Hunger Task Force, which I chair, in order to, number one, step up the plant program to include livestock, poultry, aquaculture, and fisheries. Number two, improve production, processing, and marketing logistics. Number three, sustain implementation of price controls. Number four, to sustain and enhance joint management and control of African swine fever. Number five, to reduce crop damage caused by typhoons. Number six, to continue to enhance tackling the hunger concern as a result of this ongoing pandemic. And number seven, ensure closer coordination with regard to messaging related to the food security of our country. Bukod po dito, tinalakay rin po ng gabinete ang pag-roll out po ng ating vaccines. Rineport po ng Department of Finance na may 75 billion pesos po tayo na nakalaan para sa pag-procure ng vaccines para naman po sa 57 million recipients. When you add the 13 million Filipinos that will be covered by various LGUs and private sector vaccination efforts, a total of 70 million Filipinos should be able to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. The planned rollout of our vaccines is good news that impacts not only the health of our people but the economic well-being of our country as well. The Cabinet also learned last night that credit rating agency Fitch Ratings affirms its BBB rating for the Philippines and stable outlook for its economy, as it expects us to continue bouncing back this year due to our vaccination program, due in part to our vaccination program. Ang mga ito po ay mga overview ng mga tinalakay sa gabinete sa cabinet meeting kagabi. Marami pong mga detalye ang mga ahensya na nakatutok sa mga agenda items na ito, and we will work with the concerned agencies to flesh out these details in the days to come. Mga kababayan, sa patuloy natin na pakikipagbuno sa pandemya, mga sakuna at iba pa, sa pagharap natin sa mga parating pa na mga hamon at pagsubok, kasali na dyan ang kagutuman. Kailangan nating magtulungan. Maraming salamat po. Daghang salamat sa tanan. Amping kamo kanunay. Ampo kanunay.
Thank you, Cabsec. Before we start or before we proceed to the Q&A session, panoorin mo natin yung mga mechanics para ho sa ating pong question and answer session.
The mechanics for the Q&A portion.
1. Make sure that you join the Zoom meeting room with your name and the name of your media outlet. 2. Questions sent in advance by the media will be read in order of submission. 3. To ask a question live, you may click the raise hand button or notify me through the Zoom Q&A chat box. I will then call your attention when it's your turn to speak. 4. Please state your name and media outlet before asking your question and say to whom your questions are directed to. 5. To make way for other participants, the media participant may initially ask 2 to 3 questions. You will be allowed to ask more questions later on if time permits. 6. We encourage our media participants to please only limit your questions related to the topic.
Our first question will come from Trish Terada of CNN Philippines. Trish?
Hello. Hello, good morning, Secretary.
Ay, magandang umaga, Trish. Morning.
Good morning po. Sir, doon na po dun sa vaccine, sir, because you mentioned that 75 billion will be allocated for vaccine procurement. So parang all in all, we're targeting 70 million. Sir, yesterday, there was various information about vaccines as to when it will arrive in the country. Just, sir, for the record, natanong po ba ng Pangulo or napag-usapan po ba sa gabinete kagabi kung kailan po talaga inaasahan yung unang dating ng mga bakuna? And which brand, if you may share?
Well, unang-una sa lahat, napakaliwanag po na malaki yung kumpiyansa ng Pangulo at ng buong gabinete sa buong team ni Secretary Charlie Galvez. Bagamat hindi naman na itanong talaga yung total details ng rollout, ang napag-usapan lamang ay yung tungkol sa number 1, that we have enough funds to cover the needs for the vaccines. Number 2, yung computation ng Department of Finance kung ilang mga bakuna. By averaging out the cost per vaccine times how many doses, then the number of Filipinos that we need to inoculate. At nakita nga po doon na kung ano yung magiging kumbaga sagot ng national government plus yung initiatives ng private sector pati ang LGUs. So we're confident to be able to cover that many Filipinos, and that's enough for herd immunity. At siguro ang pinaka-essence ng report ng Department of Finance is number 1, that we have enough funds. Number 2, we have enough funds for enough number of Filipinos to be covered, excluding yung mga underage. No? So napag-usapan kagabi, kung 18 years old ba and below or 16 years old and below ang hindi na kailangan magpabakuna kasi unahin natin for herd immunity yung above 18 or above 16. So really depends on the vaccine brand. Some vaccine brands say that pwede yung 16 and below, yung iba sinasabi it's 18 and below. So depending sa vaccine brand, no. But ang pinaka-essence, ang bottom line natin is that we have enough funds and we have enough to cover for herd immunity in the Philippines. And full trust and confidence sa team ni Secretary Galvez to be able to acquire enough vaccines for this national effort.
Sir, dito po sa nabanggit niyo pong rising case ng online pornography among involving children, ano po yung naging initial na reaction dito ng Pangulo? And what will be his orders? Kumbaga magkakaroon ba tayo are we expecting crackdowns and initial information, sir? Is there a syndicate behind this or kumbaga individual, kumbaga per family ba ito nangyayari?
Well, first things first, I think the real message is for the ISPs natin, our internet service providers. You must be reminded, and you are duly reminded right now, of your obligations under Republic Act 9775. And Republic Act 9775 is actually our Anti-Child Pornography Act of 2009. So ibig sabihin, since 2009, dapat duly noted na ninyo ang obligations ng ating mga internet service providers which, by the way, includes putting up the technology to block any child pornography sites happening using your internet service. And might I remind you that in this Section 15 of the said Republic Act, any ISP found guilty of willfully and knowingly failing to comply with the notice and installation requirements under Section 9, installation of technology that will block child pornography here in the country, will suffer the penalty of fine of 500,000 to 1 million pesos for your first offense. And in case of a subsequent offense, the penalty shall be a fine of not less than 1 million to 2 million pesos plus revocation of your license to operate. If you want to stamp out child pornography in the country, I think we have to start with our ISPs. So ISPs, you are hereby duly served with notice of your obligations under Republic Act 9775. And the
Do they have a
NTC
deadline?
is hereby instructed to do your duty as far as any violations are concerned, NTC being a part of the Interagency Council against child pornography.
Do we have a deadline for this, sir?
Well, ASAP, immediately.
Sir, maybe last from me, no? Napag-usapan po kaya kagabi sa cabinet meeting yung issue ng pagkakautang ng PhilHealth, not just to Red Cross, no, but to other private hospitals as well.
Well, not this cabinet meeting. This was discussed in the previous cabinet meeting. And napag-usapan naman dun sa previous cabinet meeting the duties of PhilHealth in paying its obligations. And report naman ng PhilHealth na there are procedural aspects to this, no? Kailangan rin po kasi natin makita na hindi naman pwede basta-basta magbayad ang PhilHealth, no? Pera din ng taong bayang 'yan. So, kailangan mag-comply muna ang mga laboratory sa lahat ng mga procedural requirements. At ang promise naman ng PhilHealth ay hindi naman sila magkukulang sa pagbayad basta dumaan lang sa tamang proseso at procedure. Kasi the last thing that we wanna happen is PhilHealth paying without following the proper procedure. But yung assurance po ng PhilHealth ay babayaran naman yung kailangan bayaran.
Pero sir, as of now, wala pa silang target date as to when they will comply with their, or when they will settle with their dues. Kasi I think marami pong nagrereklamo ngayon na private hospitals that they're having a hard time with their operations with the debts of PhilHealth.
Yes, basta makakomply lang naman sila sa procedures. Anyway, if there is any untoward delays in the claims or the payment of the claims, pwede naman agad sila makipag-ugnayan sa aming tanggapan sa 8888 hotline or other avenues where they can voice out their complaint, and we will act accordingly.
Thank you, Secretary. Salamat
Salamat din
po.
po.
Thank you, Trish Tarada of CNN Philippines. We have phone-in questions from Ms. Tina Mendez of the Philippine Star. First question, how prepared is the government in terms of storage and rollout of the vaccines once the supply arrives the country? Pfizer, for instance, needs to be stored in below zero temperature.
Ang alam ko, ang pagkakaintindi ko kasi itong mga pharmaceutical companies, when they come in and enter into contracts with us, we have naman the ability or pwede naman nating ibigay yung mga responsibilities and obligations na yan sa mga pharma companies, including yung proper distribution. No? So that's also part and parcel of the rollout of the vaccine. Of course, kung kinakailangan ng support from the government, nandyan naman po yung suporta na maibibigay ng gobyerno. No? Plus, of course, the private sector efforts also. But obviously, it is something that we are monitoring kasi naman po, importante hindi lamang yung pagdating ng bakuna dito, kundi yung proper storage, pati yung proper transportation. No? So, some of the pharmaceutical companies have their own distribution channels and outlets. And depending on what comes out during the negotiations na ginagawa ni Secretary Charlie and his team with the different pharma companies, no? So, hindi lamang yung pag-acquire ng bakuna, but even yung storage may form part and parcel of the negotiations in terms of the obligations din ng pharma companies. Because at the last, ang ayaw rin ng pharma company, di ba? Hindi rin gusto ng pharma company na magdala sila ng mga bakuna dito pero hindi rin sila prepared sa mga storage obligations nila because masisira din yung kumbaga yung bakuna at masisira din yung pangalan ng mga pharma companies. So kasama yan sa mga negotiations na pinag-uusapan ngayon.
Second question from Ms. Dina Mendez of Philippine Star. How are we preparing our nurses or medical workers who would administer the vaccines?
Yes, that's part and parcel of the plans being rolled out by the vaccine team. Syempre, alam naman po natin na kasama yung Department of Health dyan. We also have had vaccination programs na nationwide. So, kumbaga meron na po tayong template in terms of the vaccination program. But all we need to do is to use the template and tailor fit it to the needs of specifically for the COVID-19 vaccine. And when I say tailor fit it, kasi remember, we need 2 doses. Karamihan sa mga brands need 2 doses. So we'll have to tailor fit the rollout using the usual template natin na vaccination program. That being said, meron din po tayong unique rollout in terms of this vaccination program for COVID-19 kasi kung natatandaan nyo yung mga briefings ni Secretary Galvez at ng DOH, we will go region by region. We've already identified the regions by priority and then we will go by sectoral vaccination. So per region, may sectors po na unahin natin. Of course, the medical frontliners because they're the most exposed. So we'll start with NCR and then we will go down to the other regions like CAR, Region 3, Region 4A, Region 3, Central Visayas, Davao Region, and then all the way until maubos natin ang lahat ng regions. And then lahat ng medical frontliners na na-register natin, and then we go to the next sector na naman po, which is the senior citizens, etc. and so on and so forth. So yun po yung medyo unique lang dito sa rollout ng vaccines na to. But otherwise, we shall be using the template na ginagawa ng DOH pagdating sa immunization program.
Thank you, Kabsec. Next question will come from Sam Medanilia of Business Mirror. Ang tanong niya po, Sec, ay na-identify po kaya sa cabinet meeting kagabi kung anong ISP ang isa-sanction due to allowing child pornography in their platforms?
Hindi specifically na-identify, but we're giving notice and putting them at notice right now. And the NTC is hereby already notified to already do your duty. And so, fair warnings to all ISP. Might I remind you, 2009 pa itong batas na ito.
Second question from Sam. Ano din po kaya ang i-impose na penalty ng NTC against these firms?
Ay, nandiyan na po. Nabasa ko na po based on the Republic Act. The first offense is a fine of 500,000 to 1 million pesos, and the second and succeeding offenses is 1 million to 2 million plus revocation of license.
Thank you, Sec. Okay, our next live QA question will come from Joseph Morong of GMA7. Joseph?
Sir, good morning.
Hi, good morning, Joseph.
Sir, I'd like to ask you about the vaccination program of the government. No? You mentioned na yung 75 billion is now only for 57 million recipients and the other 13 million will be covered by the LGU. But we thought in the beginning, when they were budgeting this vaccine budget, it was the 75 million was already for 60 to 70 million Filipinos. But nag-isip 57 na lang.
Kasi yung pag-compute ng DOF was just for illustration purposes kay Pangulo, just to assure the President that we have enough to cover. Kasi syempre, it will really depend on the vaccine that is available, the vaccines that will come into the country, and the cost. The cost is not equal. So, ang rough computation or illustration na ginawa lang ng Department of Finance is based on an average cost ng lahat ng vaccines na we expect to be rolled out in the Philippines. So, kumbaga, it's not an exact mathematical computation. It is just an illustration na kaya natin makover yung dapat natin na makover for herd immunity to happen. Siguro when I say herd immunity, ang makover natin will be those lang underage ang hindi naman kailangan natin pabakunahan. But ang computation lang was based on how many Filipinos, then compute how many Filipinos in total minus the number of estimated Filipinos who are 16 to 18 years old and below. And then we had, then na-compute na yung estimated number, and then magkano yung average cost, and then so on and so forth to get to that. So it's not an exact mathematical computation kasi hindi rin natin alam kasi kung ano yung hindi natin exactly alam kung ano yung mga vaccines na darating. Kasi lahat yan mag-EUA application pa. Lahat po yan may nagki-clinical trial pa, etc., etc. And all of them have different costs. So it's just an illustration.
So where did you get the 57 million?
So ang ginawa, I don't have the calculations here, no, but ang ginawa is sabihin natin ang average cost is ganito, and then sabihin natin ganito karami ang kinakailangan na mabakunahan, ganito karami ang makover ng LGU. So ang naiwan is ganito, and then ganito yung computation na average per average for the 2 doses per patient.
So mukhang sirhin natin yun na talaga at umasa na dun sa LGU number. Kasi before, when the cabinet is discussing itong vaccination, 70 million covered by the 75 billion. But now you have the LGUs. So finactoring nyo na rin yung capability ng LGUs. You gave some of the recipients to the LGUs, correct?
I guess we're factoring in the LGUs because syempre we have to adapt also to what is happening on the ground. At the first instance siguro when the pronouncements were made, hindi pa natin alam kung how aggressive the LGUs will be in terms of seeking out to do their own initiatives for vaccination. Now that we're getting a lot of more aggressiveness sa mga LGUs in terms of their commitment to also initiate their own acquisition of the vaccines for the respective localities, then the DOF was able to factor that in already in their rough computation. So ibig sabihin, dati hindi pa natin alam kung ganun ba ka-aggressive ang mga LGUs. Now, it seems like the trend is marami na sa mga LGUs ang nagko-commit na at marami na rin mga private sector companies ang nagko-commit na rin. So whatever, siguro ang bottom line na lang natin, Joseph, is whatever the cost, the national government will make sure that we have the budget. Kung kailangan pa nating dagdagan. Kasi remember, we also have to remember na dun sa budget po, yung pag-fill up ng unprogrammed funds na yan might entail for us to borrow, di ba? So, and because of the procurement challenges, we might have to use the borrowing facility in order for us to procure. So in any case, kung sasaluin naman ng iba't ibang mga LGUs at iba't ibang mga private sector companies, ang bottom line in the end, it's just how much do we need to really borrow in order for us to finance the vaccination program, depending on the costs and availability of the vaccines. Ang bottom line siguro, Joseph, is rest assured the national government will do its part, no, and make sure that we have enough vaccines for herd immunity.
Sir, sa budgeting lang, I'm sure meron na kayong, how do you budget the money pala? Yun na lang yung question. How do you budget the money? Because obviously, hindi kayo pwede mong hula lang ng costing. No? Halimbawa, itong 75, let's just assume this is the cost because the vaccines have their cost now. No?
Yes.
They have their prices.
So,
and how did you divide the 75 million and to what vaccine manufacturer?
So, syempre, it will depend also on which vaccine manufacturers will apply emergency use application dito, then it also depends on how far along yung ating negotiations with the other pharma companies, how successful they will be and how fast and immediate. Some might in fact overtake others, so baka may mauna pa, may ibang mahuhuli, and then those have different costs. Diba? But ang importante lang dito, Joseph, is number one, na-identify na po natin kung sino yung ating ang bilang na mga magiging beneficiaries ng vaccination program per sector, per region. Okay. Then because we have that number, then we know how many vaccines we need. So all we need to know now is what available vaccines ang pwedeng makuha ng bansang Pilipinas dito. And then magkano yung cost ng 2 doses kung sabihin natin 2 doses. And then because we have that facility through borrowing, then obviously it will depend on ano yung brand na bibilhin through that lending facility window. And then yun yung cost. And then yun yung ating uutangin if ever.
So right now, sir, meron ba kayong parang rough allotment? For example, how much are you reserving for Sinovac? How much are you reserving for Pfizer? Yung mga ganung bagay. Do we have that now?
Ang alam ko na strategy natin is like I said, naka-allocate na yan per region. Unahin muna natin yung segment sa medical frontliners. Okay, so ano yung total mo ng medical frontliners for the entire country from NCR all the way to the last region? Meron ka dyan. So yun yung ano natin. So yan ang unahin nating segment of society. At yun ang unahin natin in all of the regions. So, ilan yan? So, ilan bang masusupply ng, sabihin natin, ng vaccine manufacturer A? Sabihin natin, kalahati lang nun. Okay. So, yun lang because yun na ang kaya masupply ng vaccine company for the Philippines in the first quarter of 2021. Sabihin natin ganon. And then, makipag-negotiate pa tayo sa iba. Kailan ba darating yun? Sa second quarter. Okay, then pupunuin na natin yung lahat ng segments hanggang sa dulo nung last region and then we go to the next segment which is senior citizens. So kung ilan man yung maiiwan, then balik ka dun sa NCR for the senior citizens. And then move down the line all the way to the regions. Pag naubos ang senior citizens, dun naman tayo sa mga poorer sectors of society which na-identify na rin natin. Then you go back to NCR and then you work your way down. So, ganun po. Kaya, ang pag-fill in the blanks mo is depende kung ilan yung masusupply ng pharmaceutical A. Diba? Then, okay, dyan mo ipupuno. Then, ilan ang B? Dyan mo ipupuno. And so on and so forth. That is what we plan to do.
Okay, so just last 2 points, no? So yesterday, ang sabi, Sinovac, February, ilan ba yun? 50 million doses. Is that correct? Was that the figure discussed in the cabinet?
Mas alam, hindi namin na-discuss ang figures, so I don't have the figures with me right now. Maybe best to ask Secretary Galvez about the exact figures.
So Sinovac will go to where immediately in February?
NCR. Kasi yan ang
NCR,
first natin.
with the-
NCR, medical frontliners for NCR. Kasi yan yung number one priority natin in terms of region and in terms of segment of society.
Yun yung pong sinabi ni Secretary Galvez na February 20, yun din po yung napag-usapan sa palasyo.
Like I said, we didn't talk about the details of how many vaccines per pharma company. It was just a discussion on the assurance that we have the money to finance whatever vaccines we need for the immunization program.
Sir, sorry pero parang some are saying already late dun sa vaccination natin and we're not discussing the nitty-gritty of the plan with the President in the cabinet meeting?
Sa cabinet meeting, hindi namin napag-usapan yan. Although ang details yan, although lahat ng mga detalye ay napag-uusapan naman po dun sa task force under Secretary Galvez. And in fact, in the Senate hearing, yesterday also, I think all of the details of the plans were discussed by the members of the team. So pagdating sa cabinet meeting, parang kumbaga generally lang tinanong ni Pangulong Duterte si Secretary Galvez ano nangyari sa Senate hearing. at binanggit, kinento na lang ni Secretary Galvez. But ang bottom line ni Pangulo is we have a plan and the plan is being put in place. And then doon na pag-usapan na sinabi ng DOF, we also have the budget. So ibig sabihin, ang bottom line nito ni Pangulong Duterte, lahat ng yung plano na yan, nakalatag ang lahat ng detalye. At nakwento na nga rin po dun sa Senate hearing. So lahat po yan ay buong-buo na po. Lahat po yan nakalatag na yung buong detalye ng plano. And with the assurance that all of the details of the plan have been worked out, then and the assurance of the DOF that we have enough funds for it. And
Sir,
the
Sir,
President
CPRD
was
gusto
assured.
magpapakuna ng Sinovac?
Ay, hindi ko po alam.
CPRD?
Hindi ko po alam.
Okay, sige. Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Joseph Morong of GMA 7. Two questions from Ace Romero of the Philippine Star. There are negative reactions about the policy or against the policy that the public cannot choose the brand of vaccine they cannot receive. While it has been clarified that it is not yet formalized through an IATF resolution, there is a consensus about it, according to Secretary Roque. Is this final?
Ang napag-usapan namin sa IATF, ganito, hindi natin maiwasan, gaya ng sinabi ko kanina, na meron tayo, na segmentize natin kung sino yung priority na segment ng population ang babakunahan at saan tayo magsisimula na region all the way down. So sabihin natin NCR at unahin natin yung mga medical frontliners. Okay, napag-usapan sa IATF na maari hindi natin maiwasan anong gagawin natin kung meron mga na-identify tayo ng mga medical frontliners, for example, who do not wish to be vaccinated. Okay? So, ang mangyayari po niyan is we will have to have them sign some sort of waiver or an understanding or a waiver or a document that they understand the implications of them waiving their privilege or their slot to get vaccinated. So, kung si Mr. Juan de la Cruz, sabihin natin, ay isang medical frontliner na taga-NCR at siya po yung nandun, nakalista na dapat kumuha ng bakuna na available na po. At sinabi ni Juan de la Cruz na ayoko magpabakuna. Then what will happen to Mr. Juan de la Cruz is ilalagay na po siya sa, ang isang pinag-usapan namin sa IATF is ilagay siya sa pinakadulo ng linya. Hindi yung pinakadulo ng linya ng medical frontliners, kundi yung pinakadulo ng linya na dapat natin bakunahan. Basta naintindihan po niya na yun po yung magiging implication at effect ng pag-waive niya sa slot niya. And so on and so forth. Kung sino magpapabakuna, then well and good. But those na tatanggi or hihindi, then dun ka sa dulo, then maaring hintayin mo kung ano yung magiging available na brand nung time na yon. Kasi it's really ang reality po is we have to understand the reality. No? Number one, there are different brands who are currently still applying for EUA in the Philippines. Okay, some, and we cannot force them, di ba? There are some brands na nakikipag-negotiate din po yung team ni Secretary Charlie Galvez. So, we cannot say for certain kung ano yung, di ba? We cannot predict kung sino yung magiging first, second, third. Although, sinabi na ng isang brand na will be prepared na by February, then perhaps, possibly, sila yung first. So dahil sila nga po yung first, then kung sino yung nakatoka para sa pagbakuna ng time na yon, then you get your shot or you waive it. If you waive it, then ang usapan namin sa IATF, dun ka sa dulo. Then you will have to wait your turn because there are still others that we have to inoculate. So kumbaga, ang context siguro ng sinabi ni Spokes Harry is that hindi namin ma-predict na pagdating sa time mo, kung ikaw ay nakalista, hindi namin ma-predict anong brand ang nandyan. But we'll not force you. You can waive, but understand that when you waive, then you will have to give your slot to the next in line and you will have to go to the end of the line. Otherwise, medyo magiging magulo. Di ba? Kasi kung magkakanya-kanya tayong pili, then we have to put some order in terms of the queue. Right? At yan po yung mga discussions namin sa IATF.
Sir, follow-up question from Ace Romero. Yung pilian daw po ba, final na daw po ba? And how do you respond to concerns of people about the quality of vaccine that will enter their system, given that they won't have any information about it?
Well, ang standard naman po na sinusunod natin, yung standards ng WHO. Number one. Number two, yung FDA naman po natin, you have to remember that the FDA here is also looking at whatever FDA regulations and applications ng mga pharma companies na ito sa ibang bansa. Ibig po sabihin, karamihan rin naman po ng mga brands na nag-apply po for FDA application here ay pumasa na rin po sa emergency use application sa ibang bansa. And might I add, these are countries that are first world countries. So, ibig sabihin, kung dumaan po sila sa FDA ng ibang bansa na mas, sabihin natin, mas first world pa kaysa sa atin, at pumasa naman po sila sa mga regulations ng FDA ng bansang yon, then, pagdating sa FDA dito, that's a big factor na titingnan ng FDA. Nevertheless, of course, the FDA also commits to the nation and, of course, to the president dahil hindi lang basta-basta silang magbibigay ng stamp of approval nila kung hindi naman dumaan sa masinsinang proseso. So there's really a whole team of experts from the DOST, from the Department of Health, even experts from the private sector na lahat nakatutok dyan at nakatingin dyan. Dun sa bisa at sa safety ng kung ano man ang bakuna ang papasok dito po sa atin. And remember, we're not an island all alone here. All you need to do is also, research and look at what other countries are doing. Common brands po yan na ginagawa at ginagamit na po sa ibang bansa at ginagamit at gagamitin po natin dito. Kumbaga, hindi lang naman dito sa bansang Pilipinas gagamitin yan. Ginagamit na rin po sa iba. So you might as well just also look at what's happening in other countries.
Question from Ms. Rose Novenario of Hataw. Kabsec, ano raw po ang reaksyon ninyo sa statement ni Bayan Muna Representative Ferdinand Gaite na may karapatan maging choosy ang mga Pinoy sa tatak ng COVID-19 vaccine na ituturok sa kanila dahil nakasalalay ang kanilang kaligtasan at pera ng bayan ang ibinayad dito?
Like I said, hindi naman namin ipepwersa. Kung time nyo na po na magpabakuna at for some reason, ayaw nyo po, for whatever reason, you waive your slot. And kung mapagkasunduan namin sa IATF, then we'll put you at the end of the line. Dun sa pinakadulo. Because, syempre, may iba pa eh. At para magkaroon ng systematic at hindi magugulo yung queuing system po natin sa pagbabakuna, then that is what we need to do. Because, again, it's really a race to the vaccines here. Not just in the country, but in the entire world. Diba? So, darating yung mga bakuna, pumasa naman sa mga standards, whatever brand it is. We're also being monitored by the WHO, by the way. These are brands that have passed the FDA of other countries. By the way, lahat ng kinakausap natin, pumasa na ng FDA ng ibang bansa. So, like I said, you may opt not to take it once your turn comes, but be prepared na you will go to the end of the line.
From Jen Kabiling of Manila Bulletin, why buy COVID-19 vaccines only for 57 million recipients? What is stopping the government from purchasing free vaccines for all Filipinos?
Yung age po. Some of the vaccines, the manufacturers and the companies say that it's some are saying na 16 and below hindi na, at some brands are saying 18 and below hindi na. So we're with that. Kumbaga, we submit to what the vaccine manufacturers tell us, advise us, as well as the WHO as well. So this is not a unique practice in the Philippines. It's a practice that is being done worldwide. Diba? So sinusunod lang din po natin yung standards worldwide.
From Miss Evelyn Quiroz of the Filipino Mirror. Reaction po sa statement ni Senate Minority Leader Franklin Drilon na parang suntok sa buwan ang vaccination program, lalo na yung sinasabi nila na 148 million doses within the year. The arrival of the vaccines is not even definite.
Ewan ko kasi baka dahil opposition, kailangan siguro yun ang sabihin. Pero abangan na lang natin kasi makikita naman natin yung pag-roll out naman yan, di ba? And we're already in advanced stages of negotiations with many of the vaccines. Kausap na rin po natin ang WHO. We're also part of that COVAX facility. So, hindi naman siguro natin pwedeng sabihin na drawing lang yung sinasabi ng WHO kasi nakikipag-negotiate din po tayo sa WHO, di ba? So, I don't know. Well, anyway, to see is to believe. So, we have the commitment of Secretary Galvez and the entire cabinet and the IATF and the commitment of the President as well. So, gagawin natin ang lahat para ma-roll out ang vaccines.
From Celerino Monte of Manila Shimbun, can an individual avail of the COVID-19 vaccine of his or her own choice at his or her own expense? Will these vaccines be available in the market this year?
Hindi po. Dahil na-explain na ito ng FDA head natin, si Director General Domingo, na these vaccines, because of the novelty, no, itong bagong bakuna na ito, mga bakuna that's available, they apply for emergency use application dito sa bansa. And an EUA is actually not for commercial purposes. Kaya nga po, ang setup is that it's only through the national government. Kung nakikipag-usap po ang private sector sa ibang pharmaceutical companies, it's through a tripartite agreement, kasama rin po ang national government. When the LGUs speak to the pharmaceutical companies, it's also through a tripartite agreement with the national government na kasama dun sa tripartite agreement na yan. Only because the unique characteristics of this, the vaccines that are available for specifically for COVID-19 is it's an EUA application, not just in the Philippines but in the entire world. Lahat ng binibigay ng mga FDA ng iba't ibang mga bansa is EUA, and by the nature of the emergency use application, it is only through national government. Why? Because again, there is limited number of vaccines available, no? Maraming mga companies and pharmaceutical companies have already completed phase 3 and that's the reason why they're ready for EUA. Some companies are still doing phase 3, some are in phase 1, phase 2. So ang setup sa buong mundo is it's all EUA and it's all through our respective national governments para hindi tayo magkaubusan. Remember, it's a worldwide battle against COVID-19. We have to set it up in a way na all national governments are all responding in a coordinated and synchronized manner. So much so na walang bansa sa buong mundo ang mapag-iiwanan. Kasi if we are not safe, no one is safe unless everyone is safe. Ganun po yun. No one is safe unless everyone is safe. So meaning to say, it has to be a rollout in the entire world. And gulo-gulo na yan if kanya-kanya tayo. No? So as much as possible, what we're trying to do is trying to synchronize and coordinate all efforts among all governments. At ang assurance nga ng international community is no nation will be left behind here. Particularly the poorer nations. Kaya nandiyan yung United Nations, nandiyan yung WHO. Hindi pwedeng may mapag-iwanan dito because otherwise there will always be that threat coming from that particular or any particular country. So let's not be negative about it, no? Because let's just support and help one another. Because like I said, it's not just an entirely solo effort of the Philippines here. We are being backed up by the whole international community. United Nations, WHO, lahat po tayong magtutulungan.
Sir, last question from Tina Mendez of Philippine Star. Napag-usapan ulit ba sa cabinet meeting ang proposed amendments ng economic provisions under the
Ay, hindi po.
Constitution.
We didn't talk about charter change.
How critical daw na ma-amend ang mga ito before 2020?
We didn't talk about charter change.
Okay, sir. That was the last question that we have time for. Closing statement, sir, before we end.
Ay,
the virtual
maraming salamat, ASEC JV, at sa lahat ng ating mga kababayan na nakikinig ngayon. Alam ko marami pang katanungan, no? Ang anaa sa inyo mga hunang-huna. Siguro ang assurance na lang po namin that we are doing everything that we can, from the President all the way to his cabinet members, all the way to the local government units, all the way to the private sector. We are helping one another because that is the only way that we can fight COVID-19. Not through bickering, not through fighting, definitely not through fake news, negative information, but through helping one another. And basta magsama-sama tayo, not just the Philippines, but the entire world, we can beat this thing. Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat, Cabinet Secretary Karlo Nograles. Maraming salamat po sa atin pong mga kasama sa media, sa Malacañang Press Corps, at sa lahat po ng media na sumali at nakatutok dito po sa ating press briefing. Diyan po nagtapos, o dito po nagtatapos, ang atin pong press briefing kasama si CABSEC Karlo Nograles.
Umabot sa 3,372 ang natagdag sa kaso ng COVID-19 sa bansa.